What we're looking at in this video is to do with databases and its entities, tables, and relationships. And the first word that we're looking at is entities. And this is a strange word. What it means is things that are in the real world. And it's much easier to explain with an example. So let's imagine that we have an online shop. And this online shop, the things in the real world, let's say that it's an online bookshop, it's going to have books, so products, and it's going to have customers. And these things, let's say it's a book, it's going to have a title, and it's going to have maybe a description, along with a price, and maybe an ISBN code. The customers will have a name and an address and perhaps some credit or debit card details. So these things here, they correspond to real world things. So we have an entity of books and we have an entity of customers. And so we can represent these things by using a table. So essentially a table is a way that we can represent an entity. And so we can have a table for all of our books, and this will store all of our books. And so we'll be putting the title in here, the description in here, the price, and the ISBN code. And then we'll have another table for our customers, and so our customers table is going to store the name of the customer, and it's going to store the address and their credit card details. So entities, which are things in the real world, we can then store inside a table in a database. Now let's look at our table which we had for our films example, and I've made it a little bit bigger. And this could be storing an entity because a film is a real world thing, it's an object. And so this is my table for my films, and it's also got directors and actors in it as well. And because I've started to put so much related information to films into this database, I've started to create a small problem. If we look here, I'm repeating the director. And again over here, I'm repeating the key star. Christian Bale appears in both The Dark Knight and Empire of the Sun. And I'm repeating Tom Hanks as well. Not only am I repeating their names, I'm also going along and repeating their dates of birth as well. Now this creates a problem in databases, and what I've created is redundancy. So redundant information is where I'm repeating it and more than is necessary. Now this is fine if I'm creating backups because I'm designing it that way, but this isn't backups, this is redundant data by accident. And the problem with doing it is that I'm more likely to create mistakes. So let's say that I misspelt one of these directors when I do a search for directors. If they were all misspelt, I could recognize that pretty quickly. But if it's only one, then that's a mistake and I'm not going to notice it. Equally, along with mistakes, it takes up more storage space. So here, every time I'm having to repeat the same name and the same birthday, I could be significantly creating more storage space required than is necessary. So what I do is I say, well, in the real world, if I go back to my entities, I'm not now looking at films, I'm looking at films, directors, and actors. So instead of, because I've got three real world things, three entities, what I can do instead is I can say, I will have one table which represents my films, and then I'll have another table which can represent my directors. So here, instead of me having my director's name inside here, I will give each director an ID number. And so this director's ID number is 1, and we see that Frank Darabont directed The Shawshank Redemption. And we use the same number 1, and so the same director, for The Green Mile. And I can do the same with my actors. I have a table which I have for the actors, and then I can say that key star number 1 is Tim Robbins here as number 1. Key star number 2, Christian Bale, is the one which is here, and also he's key star number 2 here. And maybe if we go for Tom Hanks this time, I've got the star number 5 is doing Forrest Gump and doing The Green Mile. And so I only have to store the date of birth, I only have to store the name once, and then I give it a number, and I can then have a relationship which says that these numbers here correspond to these numbers here. And just to show the relationships which are going on, I have an ID number in my directors which will correspond to the director in the films, and an ID number in my actors table which will correspond to the number which I put in the key star of the film. So these relationships here allow me, working with my three tables here, they allow me to build up a query, and this here has all of the data as a result of the query which I would have wanted in that original table. So it's joined together these three tables into one query result, and because it knows how the relationships work together, it can do this really easily. And so I've got my directors here. So in the film it said I want director 1 here, and it's gone and plucked that out from the other table. And it said I want the actor who's got ID number 1, and so it's got the actor's name and it's got their date of birth. And then all this other information from here. This information has come from my films table.